I would now like to invite Mr. Vikrant Shrotriya, Managing Director and Corporate Vice President, Novo Nordisk India Private Limited, to introduce our next keynote speaker. A very warm welcome and over to you.
Thank you very much. And I think as the evening is progressing, the sessions are becoming more and more interesting. This is one of the sessions which is going to drive India into a leap of growth, what we really see over 100 billion by 2025. The topic is R&D, the key determinant to address the current and emerging healthcare challenges. And who else can be the speaker to give this keynote address? Dr. Renu Swarup. As far as I know, she has been a researcher, scientist, advisor, and more important, at the policy front, framing the policy for biotechnology, which is going to take forward India. She is the former Secretary, Department of Biotechnology, Ministry of Science and Technology for Government of India. And having served in the department for 30 years, she has been also the chairperson for Biotechnology Industry Research Assistance Council. And she also took additional charge of Secretary, Department of Science and Technology for a short period of time. A PhD in genetics and plant breeding. She has done a postdoctoral research with John Innes Center, Norwich, UK, and she has been instrumental in planning and implementation of some of the major national programs in biotechnology area, the vision and strategy for 2001, 2007, 2015, and 2021. 4 of the transformation plans. She has been also one of the advocates when it comes to women in science by being a member of the science constituted by the Scientific Advisory Committee to the Prime Minister. And as the Secretary of Government of India, Department of Biotechnology, she actually led the network of autonomous institutions, public sector units, more than 5,000 projects across 100 research institutions, laboratories, and universities. And not only that, we all remember during the COVID times that how she led the COVID vaccines diagnosis and genomic sequences in terms of a mission which was very much successful. And as the public sector, Berg, as the founding managing director as well as the chairperson, I think she led the innovation right from the front by supporting 5,000 startups and 60 incubators. So without taking much of time, may I welcome Dr. Renu Swarup for this important keynote address. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Vikrant, for this very kind introduction. And I think you have positioned my talk on R&D innovation very appropriately after Dr. Guleria has given a talk from the clinician's viewpoint of how the pandemic has brought out not just the research, but the management of very important priorities of healthcare and how it's brought the spotlight on healthcare priorities. Today, we are going to talk about the R&D innovation and how this is important for looking at not just the healthcare priorities that have come out from the pandemic, but the future. What really is the future that's important for us to take it ahead? This pandemic gave us a wonderful learning. The pandemic not only gave us a learning, but it brought globally to the focus the SMT, how important SMT was and what was the role that SMT played in bringing out solutions which would then tackle this pandemic. This was important because for many years we have invested in creating a very, very strong and robust ecosystem. And this pandemic brought to the front that ecosystem. And it actually was like putting it into a live test case to see how this ecosystem responds. And I think we all know that India is proud of the way our scientists, our researchers, our clinicians, our doctors, everybody, all stakeholders have come out and responded to this very challenging situation that we were all faced with. I think it's important when we are discussing this to see what really is innovation, how important innovation is for R&D, and then try and see how these two complement each other, and how while we focus on R&D, it's also important that we focus on innovation to be able to not just lead from the front, but address national and global challenges. So what really is innovation? What do we really mean when we talk about innovation? I think innovation is, there are a large number of definitions for innovation, but I think innovation is finding new ways of doing things which then respond to specific needs and challenges. And I think the way innovation is positioned with R&D, it complements it as we move ahead, because what really is R&D? R&D, basically, the need for R&D is because it's like a continuous process which is required not only to develop new solutions, but to also take up cutting edge technologies, take up new cutting edge areas for development, which then make solutions, treatments affordable, accessible. And as I said, to be able to lead from the front for meeting domestic and global needs, you need to continuously bring in innovation. It's also important because innovation is a key pillar of R&D when we look at it. And when you talk about tackling any key challenges, innovation comes right in the forefront. In fact, R&D, continuous R&D with innovation is so important because it's a continuous flow of knowledge which then keeps fueling this pipeline as we move forward. Stepping back now, I think it's important for us to see what really has been our country's planning for R&D, planning for innovation, and what really is our history of innovation and R&D over these many, many years. I have to compliment OPPI because you all have been having these annual sessions. You've been sort of keeping everyone engaged to be able to promote something which is key and critical to the success of innovation and R&D, and that is the interface or the connections and collaborations between academia and industry. And I think that's one of the most important key pillars on which we have also focused as a country for many years. We have invested in innovation, and India has, as I said, a very long successful history for over many, many years. We know what our standing has been in vaccines, in diagnostics, in therapeutics, and over years, we've built very strong critical mass of human resource, of infrastructure. And this is what we then take forward, looking at what the specific requirements are as we move on. The three key pillars on which we focus are primarily the 3 C's, as we call it. The capacity building, which, as I said, is human resource and infrastructure, because that is most important and critical if you have to look at R&D, if you have to look at innovation, which can take it ahead. The second C is focusing on cutting edge technologies. Because unless and until you continue to focus on cutting edge new technologies, because science and technology is a very rapidly, dynamically moving field, and to address new issues, to address new challenges, you do need to keep bringing in new technologies. The government has played a very important role in trying to then focus, in addition to these 2 C's, on the third C, and that is collaboration. For this whole area of R&D and innovation, collaboration is the most crucial pillar on which we need to focus. Collaboration between the most important stakeholders, that is academia, industry, and of course our startups who now play such an important role. All other stakeholders, whether it's the policymakers, whether it's the investors, whether it's the regulators, the complete group, all the stakeholders have to collaborate and collectively look at coming forward in the development and delivery of what we are seeing as our final product. While we look at national collaborations, interagency collaborations, and in the government, as all of you would know, there are multiple ministries and departments which deal with different aspects of research, innovation, translation, clinical development, regulation. So their combined working together is so very important and critical. And this came out so clearly in the COVID times. So that collaboration is clearly one of the important pillars. But in addition to that, I think international collaboration is very, very important. It's important because for any new technology that we are focusing on, I think the key emphasis is to be on sharing of knowledge, sharing of data, bringing together the best practices, whether it's for the research, whether it's for the development, whether it's for trials, whether it's for regulation. Because as I said, we're all eventually addressing one common goal, which is a global challenge. Any of the healthcare priorities that you look at, and the COVID brought it out so very clearly. So international collaboration is so important and critical for us to take it forward. I think over these years, India, we have played a very important role with the government investing, in addition to bringing in very strong PPP models. The Department of Biotechnology, which I had the very good privilege of leading, along with its public sector BIRAC, has displayed so clearly the strength of PPP models. And of course, the recent COVID pandemic vaccine development, diagnostic development has shown it very clearly. So a seamless flow of information, a seamless flow of product development across the value chain, from the research lab to the incubation center, to the startups, to the industry. I think that is so important for us as we move ahead to see how we can take it forward. This innovation ecosystem today is built on a very strong foundation in our country. While introducing me, he spoke about the hundreds of laboratories which focus on biotech research. And I think if you all look at the statistics of the biotech sector, which yes has a potential, which we have put in of the 150 billion, and we are nearly around 90 billion today, more than 60% of it is from the biopharma sector. And in this, we see not just the strength that has been established in the academic institutes, and these institutes today are global best. In COVID times, our academic institutes have been recognized by the global consortia as validation centers, as research centers. The human resource that we bring out, the training programs that we are taking on to be able to build this capacity. And then, of course, the shared infrastructure. Because if you look at any of the key areas of research that you need to focus on, the startups today form a very, very strong component of that. And if we are looking at this value chain from research to product development, there is no way that we can miss this very important segment, which today is so vibrant. Over 5,000 startups, nearly over 65 to 70 incubation centers. We are now focusing on setting up these technology clusters. The technology clusters are where the startups can actually develop their prototypes, set up small pilot manufacturing plants to be able to then move, as we say, from Startup India to Make in India. And that is how this, and they also have these regulatory test beds, they have fab labs, a number of these components to be set up. And we do have some of these incubation centers which have taken on this responsibility, but clearly we need to focus on many more, but setting up of parks, setting up of special zones. This really is the strength of the investment that we have made over these many, many years. But as they say, the investment that we make in today is really what is going to pay dividends as we require it tomorrow. We didn't realize that the pandemic is going to so very quickly ask us for those dividends, for those investments that we made. And we saw this in less than 2 years. India became self-reliant in its diagnostic kits, a portfolio of vaccines that we've been able to develop, which we are so very proud of. We have, through our indigenous vaccines, catered to the world's largest vaccination program. I mean, look at the numbers we are talking about. Not just 2 doses, we are now going into boosters, we're going in for children vaccines, a whole portfolio of vaccines, and interestingly, different platforms. That's where innovation has come in. India was always known as a vaccine manufacturer. Globally, we are recognized today as the vaccine developer, as the innovation that we put in. We have, in a very short period of time, demonstrated our strength to focus on these 3 C's and delivered as we have in this short period of time, meeting the domestic needs, but also being recognized for global, for many of the global requirements that are there. We have this whole robust ecosystem that was set up for vaccine development in India. From the development to the manufacturing to the clinical validation, we set up more than 53 clinical validation, clinical trial sites. We have more than 10 repositories which were set up for samples. We have nearly about 6 or 7 immunoassay validation labs. I mean, how quickly this was all put into place. It was because of the collaborations, because, as I said, of focusing on those 3 C's, on the capacity, on the cutting edge technologies, on the collaborations. And this really gave us our strength as we move ahead. Having said all this, I think in conclusion, it's important for us to understand what then is the way forward. How do we move beyond COVID? Excellent. We've demonstrated so very beautifully in COVID times. We've been able to sort of not only, as I said, be successful within the country, but being recognized globally. How can we now use this ecosystem to tackle our other healthcare priorities? There are so many. AMR, one of our silent pandemic, which we need to focus our attention on. Lifestyle diseases, maternal and child health, brain-related diseases. You're looking at geriatric diseases. I mean, there's no end of it. We just need to look at it. And obviously, you have cancer and so many others. How do we put this ecosystem now to use? How do we put in our investments that we've done to be able to handle this? I think our focus has to be, as for COVID, everything should be taken up in a mission mode challenge model so that we can develop affordable and accessible technologies, solutions, and products which meet our requirements, meet the global requirements. As I said, we have been able to build these excellent platform technologies. Now it's important for the whole stakeholder group, the industry, the academia, the startups to come forward. We also have now with this a lot that has moved ahead in terms of the confidence on science and technology. While the government has been investing in this over many years to be able to establish this, it's also important now that we see the private sector coming ahead, not just in investing in R&D, but building these collaborative models. We have been talking about setting up knowledge translational clusters. What really are knowledge translational clusters? They are clusters where you have the academia, the industry co-located along with the startups so that there is a seamless flow of information and they're not 2 parallel tracks which move. You cannot have an academia coming up with a technology which is ready at a prototype level and then saying, now we are transferring this technology to an industry and they will take it ahead. It doesn't work like this. It has to be like one common relay race where one player passes on the baton to the other as they move into the next step. So you have to be partners right from the beginning in the co-development process to be able to deliver at the end in terms of new products that we're looking at. There are a large number of new technologies that we need to focus on. While there are targets in terms of the diseases I spoke about, there are a large number of technologies which have huge potential. And I think India as a country has the capacities and the competence. It's just that we need to focus on it. Whether you talk about gene editing, whether you talk about CAR T cell, whether you talk about regenerative medicines, each of them. And I think that is really how our innovative potential will move ahead. So, in conclusion and in summary, I think I would just like to leave three key messages with you. And as OPPI, as all stakeholders who've collected here, you are the key people who are going to move this needle forward in terms of addressing other healthcare challenges. We have already demonstrated the success of the competence that we have. What we need to do is to keep this momentum going. We cannot just let go of the momentum that we've built for this pandemic. We need to ensure that the strengths that we have built in capacity, in cutting edge technology, and in collaboration are sustained. They are sustained and then they are moved ahead for other priorities. The second most important aspect is while we look at research and we look at the whole ecosystem of translation, it's important that we do not lose sight on the manufacturing. The manufacturing is key. We need to look at innovative technologies for manufacturing that we can take ahead. And lastly, I think the key message is our ecosystem is now future ready. What we have to do is to find innovative models so that we can scale it up and we can sustain it to meet the needs and the requirements of our country. So thank you very much. As OPPI and as all stakeholders, you all have a very big responsibility on you to see that you keep this momentum, you keep this potential that is there, and each one takes forward the action in terms of what we've been able to succeed during the pandemic. Beyond the pandemic, we have much more to do, and I'm confident that as a country we will be able to do it. Atmanirbhar Bharat, not just for the country, but for the global needs. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Dr. Renu Swarup, for that encouragement and inspiration. Thank you very much for being here with us.